Afternoon for those who are coming, for those who are expected to come. So I'm waiting for all of you to join us. So today we have to discuss some points that are connected with the cultural aspect of translation. Some of the definitions and approaches existing nowadays. And while people are joining, yes, I guess that you are expected to have the lectures in the theory of translation up to the end of the term. I have 2 more lectures ahead with you, and then Evgenia Alexandrovna Moroskina is to be your lecturer as well. Yeah, so there should be some other blocks there. So speaking about our issue today. So as I said, it is dedicated to the cultural aspect of translation, and you may have a look at the presentation as usual. Yeah, let us start. So first of all, I guess that all the names that we have to discuss and somehow mention today are familiar to you. And among them is a famous linguist, Julian House. Yes, Julian House. We touched upon her approach connected with the Scopus theory and functionalist approaches. I guess you remember her. And she regarded translation as the replacement of the original text with another text. So nothing special here in this very definition. But translations are, according to her, mediate between languages, societies, and literature. And it is through translation that cultural and linguistic barriers are overcome. And it is evident that translation is a second-hand communication as it provides access to something that already exists. Yes, this is the way that we are used when we go further, in other words. And according to her, translation is not only a linguistic act, but also is a cultural act, as language and culture cannot be separated. And any language reflects and shapes the reality of culture in which it exists. And considering from the point of view of intercultural communication, translation is a very complicated process, as a translator has to link the original text that exists in its cultural reality to target communicative conditions and target cultural reality. So they work as a whole complex, as a whole aggregate. We have cultural reality, our target communicative conditions, and target cultural reality. And of course, when we are talking about cultural aspects of translation, we have to know the definition of culture itself. And as given in the concise Oxford Dictionary, the definition of culture varies from description of the arts to plants, bacteria cultivation, and very many other things. And it includes a wide range of intermediary aspects. Of course, we have to be more specific in this case. We should use something more concise, and let us consider different definitions given by our famous scholars, and one of them is Peter Newmark. You may see his name in the presentation and some of the basic points there. Peter Newmark defines culture as the way of life and its manifestations that are peculiar to a community that uses a particular language as its means of expression. Thus, each language group has its own culturally specific features. The English have some culturally specific features, the Scots have them, and so on and so forth. So each language group has its own culturally specific features. And further, Peter Newmark states that he does not regard language as a component. He does not regard language as a component or feature of culture. Because he treats it as a different thing. Yes, it is not just a component of culture. Language is not a component, according to him. This is something different. This is something inseparable from culture. It is not it's a component, you see. But Hans Vermeer, he stated the other thing. He says that language is a part of culture. So he sticks to the opposing opinion in this case. And the difference between these two approaches, I mean, given by Peter Newmark and Hans Vermeer, is that Vermeer's words that language is a part of culture imply the impossibility to translate, whereas the latter, I mean, translating the source language into a suitable form of target language, is the part of the translator's role in transcultural communication. Otherwise, the existence of the translator becomes meaningless. You see, if once again Hans Vermeer treats language as a part of culture, it means that it is impossible to translate one culture into another culture, you see, and this is, of course, meaningless, and it is impossible just to make the translation like a transcultural process and no more. And of course, as the translator has to perform the task of transcoding one language and transmitting the words implying some cultural meanings into the other one, of course, this very work becomes meaningless if we treat it like this. It is not a part of culture, it is just the same as culture, so they go together. They are inseparable, language plus culture. So, just to derive this thought, the notion of culture is really essential to considering the implications for translation. That is, despite the differences in the opinion as to whether language is part of culture or not, so they can't be divided at all. Eugene Nider, another scientist, yes, gives an equal importance both to linguistic and cultural differences between the two languages, I mean the source language and target language. And he concludes that differences between cultures may cause more severe complications for the translator than do differences in language structure. You see, we can overcome the differences in the language structure and find some grammatical means or syntactical means for this. If you remember, when we spoke about untranslatability, we had the example like idет дождь in Russian and it is raining in English. and from the linguistic point of view, they are untranslatable. But due to we overcome these differences, yes, using some grammatical patterns existing in the two languages, and thus we make it possible to translate from one language into another. But you see, when we try to render some cultural phenomena from one language into another, it presents more difficulties, yes, because it is rather difficult to explain and to translate the phenomena. There. And of course, these cultural implications, these cultural senses for translation are of significant importance as well as lexical concerns. So, Yuri Lotman, this is the Russian scientist, so his theory states that no language can exist unless it is steeped in the context of culture, and no culture can exist which does not have its center the structure of natural language. So you see, in the center of culture is the language, and further, just on the so if we imagine that that language is a kind of wall, yes, and it is a kind of nucleus for the whole sphere of culture. You see, so it is situated in the center of the culture itself, because without the language, it is impossible to speak about any culture. And of course, these are two things that can't be divided, separated, and can't be seen as parts of something. So Susan Bassnett underlines the importance of this consideration. I mean that the language and culture go together, and she states that language is the heart within the body of culture. You see, just the same idea given by Yuri Lotman, and she says that linguistic notions of transferring meaning are seen as being only part of the translation process. And the whole set of extra linguistic criteria must also be considered. And of course, you know that extra linguistic criteria are concerned with culture, with some precedent phenomena like прецедентные phenomena, right, with some background information, with knowledge of the world, and so on and so forth. And further, Bassnett points out that the translator must tackle the source language text in such a way that the target language version will correspond to the source language version. And of course, to impose the value system of the source language onto the target language is a dangerous ground. То есть мы не можем просто так наложить одну культуру на другую. Yes, and this is the main idea by Susan. So we can't just once again impose the value system, то есть ценностную систему культуры исходного языка. Мы не можем наложить ценностную культуру одного языка на ценностную культуру другого языка. So this is rather dangerous, and of course, according to her, these structures, these systems do not coincide at all. And when translating, it is important to consider not only the lexical impact on the target language reader, but also the manner in which cultural aspects may be perceived, and make translating decisions accordingly. This is it. judging by all these approaches and definitions to culture, we should say that practically in all of them, language is equal to culture. And as I said, they are inseparable. This is the first and foremost approach. And the other one is that language is a part of culture as it comprises many more features like background information, some skills that a translator may possess, and so on and so forth. But of course, they are equal. This is the basic idea of all of them. So, yes, when we are dealing with the translation of some cultural words, some cultural notions, we have to bear in mind some approaches that scientists have worked out, and one of them, one of the approaches was given by Peter Newmark. And he proposes two opposing methods in dealing with cultural words and notions. So this is transference and componential analysis. As Peter Newmark mentions, transference gives local color, keeping cultural names and concepts. He places emphasis on culture, meaningful to the readers, and he claims that this method may cause problems for the general readers and may limit the comprehension of certain aspects. So the basic idea of transference is just maybe transliteration, yeah, or transcription. We just transfer from one language into another. So we transfer in his words local color, like or such cultural words like tundras, savannas, prairies. Yes, they are all local words, and we transliterate them into Russian, for instance, and nothing more. Yes, like tundra, savanna, area. We retain this local coloring. And this approach in translation is called transference. The same holds true for names of fruits like avocado or passion fruit. So in Russian, passion fruit is sometimes called for like passiflora, so some biological name. And in the more common version, we have maracuya. Yeah, but nonetheless, they are cultural words that have undergone some transference. And it usually used in literary texts, and as I said, it offers some local color and atmosphere. And in specialist texts, in some scientific texts, yes, or some publicistic texts. So it enables the readers, some of whom may be more or less familiar with the source language, to identify the referent, particular name or a concept. So, I mean, what is the text about? Yes. So it happens without any difficulty. But they say that transference is brief and concise and more or less understandable, so it blocks comprehension. То есть у нас вот этот прием блокирует понимание полностью. So it emphasizes the culture and it excludes the message. То есть оно таки помогает выявить эту культуру, культурную составляющую, то есть мы понимаем, что какие-то появляются слова, связанные с той или иной культурой, Но, тем не менее, сам посыл этого выражения, например, да, или сам посыл текста, он теряется. That is why we say that it emphasizes the culture and excludes the message. It does not communicate, and some scholars would say that it is not a translation procedure at all. They go even further. That is why Peter Newmark singled out componential analysis, and he describes it as being the most accurate translation procedure, which excludes the culture but highlights the message. So it does, so to say, vice versa. Yes, it excludes the culture and highlights the message. And componential analysis is based on a component common to the source language and target language. Say in the case of the word dacha in Russian, we have house, yes, and dom, to which we add some extra contextual or distinguishing components like house for the wealthy, or a house for some summer residents, and so on and so forth. So you see that this componential analysis is economical and has not the pragmatic effect of the original, but nonetheless, we have to bear in mind the motivation, the cultural aspect, and of course the linguistic aspect. Yes, what is meant by this that word. But of course, componential analysis is a way of formalizing and stating precisely the sense relations that hold among words, and it involves analyzing the sense of a word and judging by its components. All in all, they say that this is a process of breaking down the sense of a word into semantic features. And this process is defined as follows. So you may, in the presentation, you may have a look at number 5, yes, the 5th slide. Here you see this very componential analysis in full. As I said, it is the approach that analyzes word meaning, but by decomposing it into its atomic features. And of course, it shows the semantic features of a word. Consequently, the word man comprises such features of a human being, or then of course it is a male, yeah, and an adult. If in case of boy, it presupposes that it is a human, male, but not adult, right? And the same holds true for father, you see, and daughter. So they are all different, right? In case of daughter, we have, of course, a human, not male, maybe adult, but of course, in this connection, we have parents, yes, linked to this notion. So you see very many components, and they all help us in translation. Consequently, basing on this componential analysis, we may translate these words differently. Yes, that is why we have synonyms like, I don't know, like дочь, дочурка, доченька. Yes, so it supposes that she has a father, yes, and a mother, and consequently in the text we may also find some link between these things. Yeah. Yes, I guess that it is all concerning these very two things that we may resort to when we deal with cultural works. I mean, transference and componential analysis, judging by the approach given by Peter Newmark. But the translation theory developed, and two more translation strategies were singled out, and they are foreignization and domestication. I guess that you have heard the terms. So they are two basic translation strategies which provide both linguistic and cultural guidance. And they are termed by the American translation theorist Lawrence Venuti. And of course, we have to study this very approach. So, or you may as well base your opinions on the slide. So, domestication. What is meant here? So, domestication is the strategy that implies the minimization of foreign component of the text. Consequently, a text acquires some cultural traits of the target language. Once again, some cultural traits of the target language, and texts translated by domestication do not look like translated texts. They are like original ones created by means of the target language. And this is the main advantage of domestication, that cultural differences are obliterated, like они уничтожены, they say. So, and in translation practice, it will make a translated text as readable as possible in the target language without any traces of the source language text or without any trace of unfamiliar expressions, words, and the text seems to be very fluent and transparent and very, very understandable. So as for foreignization, it is an absolutely different approach, and it is based on the idea that foreign cultural values should not be minimized. This is the main difference. Yes, the foreign cultural values should not be minimized, and cultural norms of the source language should be conveyed in translation. Foreignization, though being the preferable strategy of translation, should not be the only way of translating texts. Sometimes applying of domestication is necessary, as any translator should take the abilities of the translation recipients into consideration, and foreignization should not be overused as well, because translations that contain too much foreign components, of course, they are the reflections of cultural stereotypes and prejudices, and this also leads to domestication of translated texts. So you see, we can't overuse any of these strategies and techniques. So, generally speaking, domestication designates the type of translation in which a transparent and fluent style is adopted to minimize the strangeness of foreign text to target language readers. And foreignization means a target text is produced which deliberately breaks target conventions, and it retains something of the foreignness of the original, just for us to feel that the text is not in our native language. Yes, and of course, very many disputes over domestication and foreignization have existed for a long time. I guess that you are to know that in linguistics we have very many arguments and disputes about everything. Yes, starting from the definition of linguistics and translation, finishing these private cases, and the same holds true for these two strategies. And till 1950s and 1960s, when the more systematic and mostly linguistic-oriented approach to the study of translation began to emerge, the focus had been on the linguistic level. And this is the thing that we have to remember, that the focus had been on the linguistic level until these very years. Since the cultural turn appeared in 1970s, the dispute has been viewed from a brand new perspective, from the social, cultural, and historical point of view. So you see, something has changed in the 1970s, and that was the cultural turn, so to say. And consequently, the different works appeared, and one of them is by Eugene Nida, who points out that for truly successful translation, biculturalism is even more important than bilingualism, so to say, since words have only meanings in terms of the cultures in which they function. In which they function. And cultural gaps between the source language and target language have always turned to be a hard enough sorry. These very cultural gaps between source language and target language have always turned to be a hard nut for translators to crack. So, you see, these problems have always been challenging for translators and interpreters, and that is why scientists tried and are trying to find the way out. And one of such ways is the cultural turn that was supported by, as I said, Eugene Nida, by Christian North as well. And she holds that translating means comparing cultures. This is a very important thing. And consequently, we are always, by the way, we are always talking about some European traditions, some Russian tradition, but this time in this very lecture, I just wanted to show you that in Asian culture, they are also trying, and they are also making attempts to deal with the translation. And in 2002, Chinese Translation Journal, just this very journal, yes, they alone published 6 papers and 6 books on translation strategies. From the point of view of cross-cultural communication. So you see, they are working pretty hard, yeah, and they also have some very deep ideas in this very in this very field, and in this very argue between domestication and foreignization. The voice for foreignization dominates, and such Chinese scholars, I'm not very sure about the pronunciation, but Sanjili, a representative of foreignization, thinks that the primary task of translating is to precisely and fully convey the style of the source text. So he predicts that foreignization will be the preferred strategy of literary translation in China in the 21st century. But of course, the son's opinion confronts some disagreements, so this is for sure, you see. And Kai Ping, for instance, says that domestication should be the main stream in literary translation, and heavily foreignized translation may be too foreign for readers to identify with. This is it. And of course, it is rather difficult for them to appreciate it. And in retrospect of translation history, Kai concludes that with the passage of time, foreignization always gives way to domestication. This is it. But another scholar and scientist, Hu Jianping, holds a compromise proposal. You see, he distinguishes two types of source texts, obviously in English and in Chinese, and who suggests that in order to fulfill cross-cultural communication, foreignization should be used in English-Chinese translation. You see, should be used in English-Chinese translation and in foreignization, and with the domestication as a supplement only. While in Chinese English translation, domestication should be used as much as possible. And his reason is that an enormous group of Chinese readers are eager to accept the foreign elements known of the foreign culture far more than foreign readers do about the Chinese culture. So you see this very difference. Yes, the Chinese readers want to accept foreign elements. And these elements known are in the foreign culture. And of course, foreign readers do not want to know much about the Chinese culture. That is why we should stick to different types of such strategies. This is his reason. And all in all, we should say that a wild variety viewpoints presented to be for and against domestication and foreignization are from different perspectives, from different points of view. In fact, these two techniques have their advantages and disadvantages, and of course, domesticating translation is easier for the readers to understand and to accept. As we said, judging by the definition of the phenomenon. And however, the naturalness and smoothness of the target text are often achieved at the expense of cultural and stylistic messages of the source text, not just because of the perfect domesticating and all more. And as for foreignizing translation, foreignization, so it preserves the source language formal features, and in turn informs the readers about this source language culture. It retains the elements, yes, but as for foreign and alien formal features and some cultural images, linguistic features, they may, of course, information overload. Yes, there will be too many foreign elements in a text for the reader, and of course it would be a disadvantage of the text. And all in all, these two strategies entail some losses, and these losses are inevitable in the translation process. Yes, we always face them when we deal with the translation even of some simple proper names. Yes, so we always lose some shade of meaning, especially in case of some famous names and so on and so forth. And this is of course so, but our task is to minimize this gap between the source language and target language texts. And one of the examples that I want you to see when we are talking about domestication foreignization is the analysis of the translation of Harry Potter from English into Russian, made by Maria Spivak. And so the most interesting thing that attracted attention was the translation of characters' names. Yeah, and here the translator operates with both strategies. For instance, the names of the main heroes they remain unchanged. And the only transformations they undergo are transliteration and transcription. So nothing special about the translation of the names like Harry Potter. You see Hermione Granger, Ron Weasley. So nothing special. They are translated just as they are. Why it happened? Because there is no additional or some extra information contained in these very names in English. Nothing of this sort, and of course there is no need for the translator to think up anything new in Russian. And if we take the names like Oliver Wood or Kathy Bell or Tom Riddle, of course we may translate them, and the translator could translate them directly, but they would sound again weird in Russian. Yes, why shall we translate like Oliver Les, Katya Kolokolchik, something of the sort? So you see. And obviously, of course, the author of this novel, the author of this novel didn't have any purpose to connect the characters with their surnames. But of course, there are some other names that were considered by the translator, in this very case at least, to be characterisms. So they are these names suit to their owners. And this is the other group of names that we come across in Harry Potter. So you see, like Neville Longbottom. In translation, we have Neville Dolgopoops, something of the sort, yes. And here, the author used the strategy of domestication, and he tried to reveal the particular features of the characters, and in such a manner the reader can understand that Dolgopoops is tall and plump, right? And Gilderoy Lockhart, Zlatoust Locons, is something totally different in the Russian translation, and the translator simply decided to find a new name, but that sounds partially similar to the English variant, but creates an image of a man with golden curly hair who talks a lot of the subject. So you see, this is a kind of calling name, yes, Zlatoust Locons. You see something, yes, here we have for some these techniques combined, yes, domestication plus foreignization, so a bit. Or we have a very interesting thing about Vernon Dursley. It can be translated like Vernon Dursley или Dursley, but however, the translator here, yes, Maria Spivak, so she chooses another variant, and she renders it like Vernon Dursel, and it is associated with the word fool in Russian, like durak, yes. Obviously, if the personage was positive, the translator should choose another variant to make it more harmonious. It exists, you see, and that is why it is translated like this. And if we also investigate the translation of names of places in Harry Potter, we will notice again that both domestication and foreignization were used by the translator. And for instance, the name of the street where Harry Potter lived is called Privet Drive, but it was translated as Tisova Ulica, U3 Street, and the translator changed the tree used in the street name, and there are two reasons why she did so. Firstly, Tisova Ulica sounds more harmonious in Russian, and secondly, U3 is more common in Russian than Privet tree, but of course, if we consider different approaches, different translations of this very novel, other translators preferred a transcription or like private drive, they say, and it helped to preserve the perception that the street is located in England. Yes, judging by these very transcription here, yes. So, you see very many examples of these phenomena exist in the novel. But of course, we have to somehow wind up, and we should say, and I should say that our foreignization and domestication are suitable in particular cases. And of course, a translator should analyze pros and cons of this or that method given in a given situation, or provided in a given situation, and somehow find a golden mean. And of course, as in many other cases, there is no one and possible correct strategy. Just the way and the best way to translate is to combine strategies together and produce the translation that on the one hand will be easily understood by the readers, and on the other hand will retain some cultural peculiarities of the source text. Of course, we can't lose all the charm and glamour of the source text, yes, just to make it simpler for the audience and no more. This is it. So we are through with cultural aspects. So now you know the examples of foreignization, domestication, transference, and componential analysis, and the names that are connected with these very filters. So what are your questions?